Welcome to How to Let Go of a Narcissist, where we explore healing journeys and tools to help survivors of narcissistic abuse reclaim their power. I'm your host, Marv Curtis, and today I'm honored to welcome Chris as our guest. He's found his way through some difficult times and he's on his way back. He's on the rebound, and he's here to share some insights that might help you on your path. Welcome, Chris.
Hi, glad to be here.
Could you share a little bit about yourself and what led you to this point in your journey?
Sure. I'm a father of four. I'm an entrepreneur. I've been running my own business for about 16 years. I'm a musician, a writer, a researcher, and a survivor. What led me to this point was my wife left me and took my children last fall and made it clear that she was doing so in order to get me to come into line. And that for me was the last straw. And I knew that I had some choices now to make. Um, yeah, that's about what got me here.
So you were out of line, huh?
Well, so as you're aware with narcissism, image management and controlling the narrative is the most important thing. And for the target, which is usually the romantic partner, that means controlling you. I was a resource to her for 20 years. My time was not my own. My thoughts, my habits, the way I wanted to spend my weekend, they were not mine. But the thing that got her the most upset was that I figured out that she was a narcissist and I was willing to say it, and that she could not abide. She tried everything, triangulation with counselors, with church elders. And it was mostly to get me to stop thinking she's a narcissist, and it didn't work. So the behaviors escalated over the course of a year before she finally left.
That's a harsh cure.
Yeah, you could say so.
So is this the first experience you've had with narcissism, or is there anything in your past that might have led up to this, or neglect or something like that?
Yeah, this is not the first narcissistic experience I've had, but I didn't really know it. I'm 42. I didn't know it until a year and a half ago when narcissism first kind of came onto my radar. And like many others, when I discovered that there was a name for the patterns of behavior that I'd been experiencing, and I could systematically go through and the checklist. Yes, she's done this. She's done this. She's done this. It was a great relief, but it was also a great shock to the system as I then began to look back and say, oh my gosh, this is not the first time. I've been married for 20 years, but I grew up in a very dysfunctional household. My father grew up with two narcissistic parents. He was a broken man by the time he got married. And when he had kids, he had never seen modeled healthy conflict, healthy intimacy, healthy conflict resolution, importantly. There was no conflict resolution in my household. He didn't know how to love. He never even said the words, I love you. And that was deeply troubling to me. But I got a constant stream of criticism. So I never felt like I was enough. My mother was a broken woman growing up also with a narcissistic father. And when she couldn't handle the conflict between my only other sibling, my brother and I, she would pretend to call social services and tell us, I'm going to go call and have you taken away. And so there was neglect and criticism from my father, abandonment from my mother. And then my brother, he's a year and a half older than I am. He showed narcissistic tendencies early on. My mother gave birth to me and brought me home from the hospital. And the first thing my brother said was, we don't want him taken back. And I think he still holds that view to this day. But he did all the things in the playbook, right? The belittling, the gaslighting, the manipulation, the coercive control, the shaming, Darvo, if you're familiar with that, the deny, attack, reverse victim offender, the baiting for conflict constantly. So that I learned early on, I have to attune to other people's emotions and bury my own because it was a matter of survival. If I didn't do that, I couldn't be sure that I would be safe. But of course, this trained me then to always subjugate my own needs, bury them, consider them not worthwhile, and only pay attention to what everybody else needed. So that set me up for narcissistic employers. I worked for 3 different narcissistic bosses, maybe a 4th. I'm a Christian. I was a worship leader for 20 years, and I was under 3 narcissistic pastors, all of which ended horribly at the discard phase. So yeah, this was not the first, but it was the first one, my wife, that is, that helped me to finally put all the pieces together, and make sense of my life.
How did you survive all that?
I have no idea. In the midst of that, right, you think, because you're groomed to think this way, I'm the problem. There
Yeah.
must be something fundamentally wrong with me. And so I spent most of my 20s and 30s diving deep into psychology and personality theory, because I was determined to figure out, all right, if I'm the problem, I better do something about this. I'm going to fix myself so that these people in my life, my wife especially, will finally say, I love you, and mean it. Will finally accept me and stop making me feel like I'm never enough. And so every time I would run into another, they were on a weekly basis, right? My wife would find some conflict to just blow out of control so that I would feel totally ashamed and broken. And so every time that happened, I would go back to the books, go back to the research. Okay, what's wrong with me? How do I fix it? Am I not loving my wife the best way? How can I love her better? How can I bury my own needs more and attune to her need more? Right? It was just I got to keep going one step after another. And maybe one day I'll figure this all out. Maybe one day I'll fix myself and I'll be acceptable again.
Yeah. So that people-pleasing trait is really part of being much more sensitive than the average person. Do you associate your highly sensitive, compassionate, helping nature with being sort of targeted by these various people? Do you think that they picked that up in you?
Yeah. In fact, I'm forgetting his name. There's a psychologist out there who he's also a narcissistic abuse survivor, and he's kind of recoined the term codependent people pleasing, all that, with SLD, which self-love. What is the D? Self-love, not discrepancy. You don't have enough of it. That's the problem. There's a D word for that, but I'm blanking on.
Which should be a problem.
What's that?
Deficiency?
Yes. Self-love deficiency. Thank you. And he writes a book that's called the Human Magnet Syndrome. And he posits in there the theory that those who are sensitive, those who are compassionate and highly empathic, they seem to attract, so if we call them givers, they seem to attract takers.
Yeah.
And I think particularly those of us who we have a natural tendency, right, in our personalities towards being generous. We tend to attract people who want to take advantage of that. And unless that's trained early, to have a healthy sense of self-worth, because I think empathy tends to come with low self-worth, unfortunately. And it takes maybe a serious crisis to finally come to grips with that. But yeah, definitely, being a giver and naturally wanting to help and sacrifice, narcissists take notice. They say, here's somebody I can exploit for my own purposes.
Yeah. They'll put up with it.
Right.
So, if you think back, what was one strategy or tool that made the biggest difference in your recovery to this point?
I think the biggest for me was allowing myself to feel emotions that I had buried. It was allowing myself to actually go through the process of grief, and to start saying, okay, I have these feelings, I have these sensations, I have these emotions, and I need to actually let them speak. I need to process them or I'm never going to heal. And so I had to go through the entire process of grief last fall after my wife left. And it took about 2.5, 3 months
Wow.
before that peaked. And I was finally able to process this in a healthy way. But yeah, after a lifetime of saying, no, my needs don't matter, I had to finally say, actually, my needs do matter. And I'm not going to make it out of this alive unless I take stock of my own emotions and needs and begin to answer them. Um, yeah, I'll leave that there for now.
Such a powerful shift. So if you could go back and give your past self, and I'm talking going back as far as you need to, if you were
Yeah.
going to give your past self one piece of advice during your hardest moments, what would that advice be?
I was in desperate need for external validation all of my life, and I never got it. And I thought, man, if I could just get external validation, could just get somebody else saying, yes, you're enough, I would be okay. And if I could go back and talk to myself as a young man, I would say, no, that's an external locus of control. That's a very dangerous thing. You can validate you, and you don't need it. Nice. It's nice to have other people validate you, but you need to be able to validate you. You need to know that your decisions are the best ones you can make right now. You need to know that you're someone worth taking care of, and you don't
Hmm.
need someone else to tell you that. It's your responsibility, and you can do this.
So if you were going to leave a message for people who are listening to this now and who relate to your experience, both as a child and in your recent marriage, you're going to give them a message. What would you tell to somebody who's still struggling?
Probably tell them you don't need to believe the story that they've been feeding you. And you need to really work out the story that you're telling yourself. Because often, what do they call that? The interject. You've got the narcissist voice in your head. So you're doing their work for them, even in their absence. And it's really important to begin to dismantle that and rewrite your story and figure out, who am I really? Not what the narcissist says. Who am I really? What do I say about myself? And begin to understand that you have self-worth despite what they've been telling you. And there, I think, if I could add on to that, there is no good ending with a narcissist. So don't expect that somehow you're finally going to win them over, that this is going to turn around, that somehow this relationship is going to work out. It won't. Um, I think there's 100% fail rate with all narcissistic relationships.
They don't change.
Right. And that's a hard thing to really grasp, especially for empaths, right? We want to believe all people can change if we just love them enough, but it's not actually true. It's not true. There are some people that it doesn't matter how much love and compassion and empathy you throw their way, how much understanding and forgiveness you offer to them, they're only going to eat it up. They're not actually going to be changed by it. And so if that's you, if you're stuck in a narcissistic relationship and you're thinking, if I just love them better, if I just forgive them more frequently, if I just modeled for them what healthy love looks like, somehow we'll beat this thing together. They'll change and they'll love it. It's not going to happen. There will be a discard, and the constant cycles of psychological abuse will continue. They never end well. And so getting out in the best way possible as soon as possible is, I think, the only advice. It's hard. Sometimes you have to wait. I had to wait for my wife to leave in order for me to feel like, okay, in a good conscience, now I can start the divorce process. If I had left prior to her leaving, it would have been abandoning my family. But for
Oh,
her to leave, she broke the marriage covenant, um, especially in taking my kids as a leverage of control point. That's when I knew, okay, I can hold my head up high. I know that I've held on to the end. Now I can divorce her and have a clear conscience. That was really important to me.
I love when you said the part about changing the story and how powerful the stories that we tell ourselves and the stories that we've been told are in shaping our beliefs and our behaviors and empowering yourself to change the story. Love that. Very powerful.
Yeah, I think a lot of that had to do with, um, I stumbled on a term, radical acceptance, a couple of years ago, and that was really the first major, how do I put this? It's the first big help that I received in coping with a narcissistic relationship. I had to first come to terms with, this is what it is, and I can't change her. I have to radically accept my circumstances, because before that, I was in I was so confused and so hurt. I didn't know what to do. I just knew that everything I was doing wasn't working. And so radical acceptance was the first big hurdle for me to finally say, okay, let's just draw a line. On this side of the line is what is actually in my control. And on the other side is what is not in my control. And I have to accept what's not within my control. I can only change the things that are in my control. And that was a big step in my healing journey. That was about 2 years ago.
Very powerful. That's also a primary point in the 12-step program.
Yeah, the Serenity Prayer. Lord, help me to accept the things I cannot change. Right. Big.
Well, this is, it's just the tragedy of narcissism is overwhelming. And added on to that, the probability of changing that and success being so low that it doesn't exist is equally tragic. It's so great that you've been able to come and share that.
Oh, well, like I said, I've been about 2 years, but really a year and a half since I stumbled on the term narcissism. And I think I might have said up till that point, so that was June of 2023, my life didn't make any sense to me. I remember I had to share my testimony in church at one point, and I remember saying that near the end of it, I'm still struggling to make sense of my pain, but I trust that one day I will. One day my life will make sense to me. It doesn't right now. And it took my wife leaving the restaurant at our anniversary dinner and discovering narcissism for all the other pieces to finally click into place and realize, now my life makes sense. That was huge. Right. 42 years of my life did not make sense to me.
Wow.
I mean, I struggled with suicide for most of my life because I could not make sense of the pain. It wasn't until narcissism and all the behaviors that go with that and understanding finally the patterns that suddenly, okay, now my life makes sense. Now I can begin to put myself back together. And that's really hard. If your life doesn't make sense to you, how can you repair? How can you rebuild? You don't even know what's wrong or what's broken.
That helpless, hopeless feeling sets in.
Oh, damned if I do, damned if I don't. Gosh, I've lived by that for so long because it was my reality, right? Sounds like you know that. Damned if I do, damned if I don't. There's nothing I can do that is going to make this better.
Exactly.
What in the world? Thankfully, that's not true anymore.
Brilliant job. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. It's actually really good to talk about it. You're right.
It's nice to get it out. All right. Well, take care. Let me know if there's anything I can do for you.
All right. I really appreciate it. Thanks, Marv.
Well, thank you. And for those of you who are listening and may resonate with this and you're looking for some help, please visit my website, marvcurtiscoaching.com. Love to help you. Love to visit with you. Thank you.